Hey there, I'm Torisaur, and welcome back to Sins and Wins, where we look at the 5 highest and 5 lowest rated episodes of a series and determine if they are a sin against the show or a win for it. In celebration of its anniversary today, we are covering the 3rd animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, which ran from September 28th, 2012 to November 12th, 2017. As always, ratings come from IMDb, and multi-part episodes are combined into one. I decided to cosplay April for this video because I didn't have her back when I did my April rankings, and I wanted to show her on my main YouTube videos because I'm really happy with how this cosplay turned out. But with that, let's get into the first sin. Sin number 5 is Season 4, Episode 4, The Outlaw Armaggon, from November 15th, 2015, with a 7.1 out of 10. Lord Dreg hires bounty hunter Armaggon to take out the turtles, and the space shark leads them into an abandoned space station whose AI, called Overmind, takes over Fugitoid's body and attempts to turn them all into robots. Armaggon saves the turtles and their allies so he can bring them back to Lord Dreg, but they manage to escape and destroy the station using Fugitoid's fusion core. I honestly think this episode is a perfect representation of the space arc in the way that it has some interesting concepts, but the execution ends up being pretty boring. There are definitely aspects of this episode that I really enjoy. I think Fugitoid is a delightful character, and learning his backstory and seeing his fear of losing his humanity was really compelling. And let's not pretend a bounty hunter space shark isn't extremely fun. I especially love Armaggon's armor/spaceship being this big metal shark that he swims through space in. But the biggest issue I have with this episode in particular is the way it feels like 2 episode plots that were mushed together. On one hand, there's Dreg sending this bounty hunter after the turtles and their allies and trying to take them out, but on the other hand, we have this plot surrounding the sentient AI trying to eradicate all organic life. If Armaggon was already an established character, I think this plot of him temporarily teaming up with the heroes to escape this common threat could have been more compelling. But with the main plot centering around Overmind taking over Fugitoid and trying to destroy the protagonists, the Armaggon plot really gets lost. As with the rest of the space arc, there's something about the writing in this episode that just feels off. I still struggle with putting my finger on what exactly about the writing in these episodes feels so lifeless, but I think it might have something to do with the way it feels more about the circumstances that the characters find themselves in, as opposed to the characters themselves. When it comes to the rest of the series, obviously each episode or story beat has its own plot, but this arc in particular feels more like, here's an opportunity for a wacky space adventure, let's show off this wacky space adventure, as opposed to, here's a fun adventure for the characters to experience. There are obviously some fun character moments and interactions, but it's much less of a focus than in the rest of the series. That's of course on top of the general plot of the space arc kind of sucking on its own, but even with these individual one-off adventures like the Outlaw Armaggon, there's just some really lackluster writing. Again, I'm still not entirely sure why the writing feels so off, because the main character moments in this episode specifically come from April giving this big speech to Fugitoid about still being human, which you would think qualifies as that typical character focus, but something about this moment still feels really stiff and unemotional to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just a me problem and the other issues I have with this arc tainting what would be good otherwise. In any case, The Outlaw Armaggon is a fairly unremarkable episode, but isn't really offensive, so I'm gonna give it a pass. Win number 5 is Season 4, Episode 20, The Super Shredder, from November 6th, 2016, with a 9.1 out of 10. The Shredder demands that Stockman give him the rest of the mutagen that has been keeping him alive, and he mutates into a monstrous Super Shredder, who sets off to reclaim his lair from Karai and the foot she now commands. With his mind even more twisted following his mutation, the Shredder uses Karai to lure Splinter out to fight him in a final confrontation. This episode is all about the drama and does a beautiful job of showcasing just how much Saki's obsession with getting revenge on Yoshi has completely corrupted him both physically and mentally. There is something so unsettling about all of these printed out images that Shredders hung around the sewers to taunt Splinter that helps drive this point even further. The fight at the end of the episode between Super Shredder and Splinter is really fun to watch and features some iconic Splinter sass.
I can smell you.
Can you smell a rock?
And of course there's the poetry of Splinter dragging the Shredder with him down into the pit for them to die together. They obviously both survive because we need to save something for the series finale, but it's still a really great and poetic moment. The episode focusing so heavily on this rivalry also means showcasing Karai specifically and how at this point in the series she's fully come to terms with the way her own life has been corrupted by it and isn't afraid to stand her ground against the man that raised her and has succumbed so violently to his hatred. This show isn't perfect with its character writing, but it's moments like this that are really well written and make the Shredder a very compelling antagonist in this series. Outside of the main storyline, there's a really fun train fight sequence with Tiger Claw and Razar. You know I love me a good train fight sequence. I do also think it's kind of funny that this episode ended up making the top 5 because Bradford says this line about his 2 Rough Crew show.
One of the top 5 episodes of all time, according to the fan sites.
The Super Shredder is a great episode that re-emphasizes that main rivalry between Shredder and Splinter and how that hatred has progressed throughout the series, easily earning its label as a win for the show. Sin number 4 is Season 3, Episode 6, Race with the Demon, from November 21st, 2014, with a 7.0 out of 10. After April, Casey, and Donnie are attacked by an aggressive driver on a grocery run, Casey decides to confront the maniac himself and discovers the driver is a mutant. Donnie and Casey work together to create a powerful car enhanced by Krang technology and a mutant chicken, and in their confrontation, Donnie is absorbed by the car and becomes its new mutant driver. Casey agrees to a race to try to get Donnie back, and with the help of his friends, Casey is able to save Donnie and defeat Speed Demon once and for all. In general, the Farmhouse arc is lower rated than the rest of the series, but I very much disagree with this episode being so lowly rated. As ridiculous as it is for the main antagonist of this episode to be a mutant car, I find it to be a lot of fun, and I especially enjoy the car chase sequences. But of course, my favorite part of this episode is the character interactions. After an entire season of Casey and Donnie constantly fighting, especially over April, to have this episode where they're working together and being great friends is delightful. There are so many great moments and interactions between the two of them, and I especially adore the reference to the 1990 film where they insult each other alphabetically.
Armpit, hand me the quarter-inch socket.
Sure thing, Barfaroni.
This baby is almost ready to roll. Krang breath?
Krang is with a K, not a C.
And look, as a major Donatello enjoyer, I obviously have a bias in favor of this episode, but as I was rewatching, I tried to assess it as objectively as possible, and I still think it's a really fun episode. Outside of his relationship with Donnie, I love how Casey is characterized here. As much as I adore 2012 Casey as one of my favorite versions of the character, he can be kind of insufferable at times with his ego and blatant disregard for other people. But Race with the Demon does a phenomenal job of showing his flaws and impulsivity by trying to go after Speed Demon on his own, but then having him recognize that he's gonna need help to take down this mutant. It's no longer just about revenge, and instead about taking out this mutant threat with his friends, paired with having the opportunity to build a cool car with Donnie. Super smart mutant chicken Dr. Cluckingsworth is so silly and fun as well, and results in this moment of judgment from April and Raph that's really funny to me.
Oh, that's a highly volatile radioactive mutagen egg, but don't worry, it's perfectly safe. Sorta.
I do also want to acknowledge the end of this episode where April says she's glad Casey and Donnie are getting along, but then kind of takes it back.
I thought I was glad they're getting along.
I've seen so many people cite this scene in the list of reasons that they hate 2012 April because they interpret it as her being mad that Casey and Donnie aren't fighting over her anymore, and she's upset that she's not getting that attention. But to me, it obviously reads as her sort of judging and making fun of these absolute dorks geeking out over the adventure they just had, because Raph specifically agrees with her.
I know how you feel, April.
In this moment, Raph and April are bonding over making fun of their friends for being nerdy, which is honestly really cute. I just had to throw that in there because I always gotta take an opportunity to defend 2012 April. Though Race with the Demon isn't a super groundbreaking episode for the series, I still think it's really fun and give it a win. Again, I do have that Donatello bias that makes me enjoy this episode a lot, but outside of that, it's nowhere near one of the worst episodes in the series and does not deserve to be called a sin. Win number 4 is Season 2, Episodes 25 and 26, The Invasion, from September 26, 2014, with a 9.1 out of 10. Part 1 has an 8.8 out of 10 and opens with the Shredder and Krang Prime teaming up to conquer New York and then the world. While April is out walking with Irma, they're attacked by footbots and retreat to the sewers to take cover. Upon discovering the lair, Irma reveals herself to be Krang Subprime in disguise, and the Krang begin their full-scale invasion of New York. The heroes are split up as they escape their home under attack, with Raph and Casey still out on the streets, Leo facing the Foot Clan's army alone, and April, Donnie, and Mikey regrouping to try to come up with what they should do next. Part 2 has a 9.4 out of 10, and Krang Prime has just stepped through the portal and started mutating New York to transform it into another Dimension X. The Turtles and their human allies reunite, but Leo has been severely injured in the beatdown by the Foot and is left in Casey's care as the other 3 Turtles and April face Krang Prime with the Turtle Mech. Though they are able to fry Krang Prime's mech and escape the city, our heroes are left devastated and uncertain of the future as they have to leave the city and their loved ones behind. The Invasion is my favorite season finale in the way the two major antagonists of the series come together as a major threat not only against the turtles but the world as a whole. The stakes have never been higher, and the intensity of that threat is amplified by the team being split up. Splinter staying behind to defend the lair and then trying to regroup with his family with Leatherhead's help has me like, what if I ship Splinter and Leatherhead now? What then? Obviously, the action throughout this episode is a lot of fun to watch, but I especially love Leo fighting off the Foot and getting absolutely destroyed by them, including everyone's favorite Leo through the window moment. But after that, we also get this really fun Shredder and Splinter fight, resulting in the first fake-out Splinter death. I think it's the first one anyway. There are so many Splinter fake-out deaths that I have lost track of them. As much as I get sick of all of the fake-out deaths that Splinter has in this series, this one in particular results in a really bittersweet moment where Raph starts freaking out and Mikey hugs him to reassure him that Splinter will be okay. I also think the turtle mech is a lot of fun, and I especially love April getting to be the fourth turtle here while Leo is out of commission. There is one main thing I really don't like about these episodes, and that is my hatred for what they did to Irma in this series. I generally think the idea of April making this friend that turns out to be a spy for the Krang is a really fun concept, but they didn't do a good job of making Irma feel like April's friend. They obviously hung out a few times throughout season 2, but I was never really convinced by their friendship, and therefore the betrayal at the end didn't carry as much weight. And of course, the fact that this is the only other on-screen adaptation of Irma, who is delightful in the 1987 series and one of my favorite characters in the whole franchise, is absolutely devastating considering she doesn't have a compelling personality and isn't even a real person. I otherwise love The Invasion. It's a great season finale that ends on a devastating cliffhanger and undeniably deserves its label as a win. Sin number 3 is season 4, episode 3, The Weird World of Wyrm, from November 8th, 2015, with a 7.0 out of 10. After investigating a distress signal coming from a spaceship wreckage, Casey finds a hypercube that contains a magical being called Wyrm, who offers to grant 3 wishes. The first wish was already used when Casey discovered the cube, and Donnie and Raph accidentally waste the other 2 wishes, which sets Wyrm free from his 5th-dimensional prison to terrorize the universe. With his newfound intelligence gained from Donnie's accidental wish, Casey outsmarts Wyrm and traps him back in his prison by wishing they never found the hypercube in the first place. I have previously called The Weird World of Wyrm my least favorite episode in the entire TMNT franchise, and as I started rewatching it, I remember thinking to myself, this episode's really not that bad. I don't know why I hated it so much. But there is a very specific point in the episode where the ball drops, and I remember just why I hate this episode so much, and that is because Wyrm is a completely insufferable character. They basically took the genie from Aladdin and drained him of all of his charm and redeeming qualities, leaving you with a soulless husk of a character that exists only to be obnoxious. All of the ridiculous slapstick and cartoon physics Wyrm employs is so unenjoyable to watch, and I think that's largely due to the fact that he's an antagonist. It takes away the fun and whimsy you would otherwise see with characters like this because it's been repurposed to terrorize the protagonists. There's also this one extremely cursed bit where Leo slices off the top of Wyrm's head and the bottom half of his body starts eating him. I hate it so much. Outside of Wyrm being an insufferable character, I generally hate the 3 wishes trope where the characters have to be careful not to waste their wishes, but then accidentally end up wasting them on something stupid anyway. It just results in a lot of drama between the characters for really dumb reasons that feel kind of out of character sometimes. I think the only things I enjoy about this episode are Casey becoming super smart and tricking Wyrm to defeat him, and this one line from Fugitoid.
It's alright as long as he hasn't opened it. Ew, it is extremely open.
Other than that, I cannot stand The Weird World of Wyrm. I don't think it still holds the title as my least favorite episode in the franchise, but it's definitely still one of my least favorites and a sin for the 2012 series. Win number 3 is season 3, episode 20, Tale of the Yokai, from August 8th, 2015, with a 9.2 out of 10. Stuck in Japan 16 years in the past, the turtles witness their father's story unfold as his rivalry with Orokusaki results in the tragic loss of his beloved Tang Shen and daughter Miwa. Tale of the Yokai really speaks for itself as we get to actually experience Shredder and Splinter's backstory that we've been told throughout the series. This backstory is by far my favorite for these characters in the franchise, as it adds a lot of depth to their motivations. In other versions of this romantic rivalry over Shen, it very much boils down to her only having eyes for Yoshi and the rival love interest never having any chance with her and is basically an angry incel. But it's clearly established that Saki and Shen have a romantic history together, and Shen is conflicted about her feelings, especially with Yoshi's hesitance to leave the clan behind to start his family with her. Then of course we have the added drama of Saki and Yoshi being raised as brothers, which I'm gonna be so honest, I did not realize until someone pointed it out to me and I made sure to look out for it in this episode. Like, obviously I clocked that they call each other brother constantly, but I thought they meant that in more of the figurative sense where they're like, wow, we're such best friends, it's like we're brothers. But Yoshi calls who I assumed was just their teacher this whole time father, and Saki specifically rejects the Hamato clan after learning his biological father was from the Foot clan, and he dismisses Shen calling them brothers because
We were never blood.
In any case, this series does the best job of showcasing how Yoshi and Saki's friendship turned to bitter rivalry that resulted in the death of the woman that they both loved. As far as the turtles go in this episode, I love the scene where they terrorize the ninja that have chosen to follow Saki and the Foot, because you can tell they're just having so much fun doing so. I also think it's kind of fun that they were brought to this time because they needed to be there to save Yoshi from the fire. I love me some time travel shenanigans. Tale of the Yokai is a great episode and definitely qualifies as a win for the series. Sin number 2 is season 3 episode 4, The Croaking, from November 7th, 2014, with a 6.9 out of 10. Mikey is scolded by his friends and family after trashing the farmhouse living room, and he runs away feeling unappreciated. In the woods, he meets Napoleon Bonafrog, who has been dismissed by his people in a similar way. Believing Mikey and his brothers are prisoners of the humans in the farmhouse, the frogs attack the farmhouse and kidnap Casey and April. The turtles work together to rescue their human allies and make peace with the frogs. As much as I love 2012 Michelangelo, this episode was exhausting to watch because of his lack of accountability. The catalyst for Mikey running away was him being upset that he was yelled at for trashing the living room for the 3rd time that week and reasonably being told to clean up after his mess. And then the show frames the other turtles for being in the wrong because April scolds them for being jerks to Mikey that don't appreciate him, even though they were completely justified in being upset at Mikey for not taking accountability, and especially because he ran away to avoid that responsibility. It's super frustrating because I think the idea of Mikey running away because he feels like he's being bullied or unappreciated is completely valid, because there are moments throughout the series in which he is mistreated. But the route they chose to take for this episode just makes Mikey really unlikable. I also cannot stand Napoleon Bonafrog. He is such an annoying character. In general, I think this interpretation of the punk frogs is fun and unique, but Napoleon is absolutely insufferable with his lack of accountability and sense of superiority over the other frogs, despite him being kind of the worst. His dialogue is also so irritating, with the way he's constantly mumbling "idiots" under his breath, and this really shitty "your mom" joke.
That turtle is a traitor.
Your mom is a traitor.
Listen, I love myself a "your mom" joke, but my god, this one is so stupid. I also hate how this episode ends with Napoleon being promoted to general despite not deserving it, and Mikey learning absolutely nothing about his lack of accountability. Again, I think this episode has a lot of potential, with Mikey being unappreciated and befriending someone in a similar situation, but the personality traits they specifically emphasized for him and Napoleon actively reflect problematic behavior. There are a couple of moments in this episode I still enjoy, like the bit where Mikey waits for Napoleon to give him a fist bump and ends up fist bumping himself, and this cute little moment with Raph.
What are you doing, dude?
Hugging, I think.
It's weird.
Yeah, let's never do that again.
The Croaking is otherwise not a good episode. The concept had a lot of potential, but the execution was really poor, so I think it deserves to be labeled as a sin for the series. Win number 2 is season 3 episodes 25 to 26, Annihilation Earth, from September 27th, 2015, with a 9.3 out of 10. Part 1 has a 9.2 out of 10, and although episode 24 first introduced the Triceratons through Zog, this episode gives us a proper introduction and explanation through Bishop. I cannot stand what they did with Bishop in this show because they took this really great antagonist from TMNT 2003 and turned him into a really boring plot device ally to the turtles. He shows up as a means of exposition about the Triceratons coming to Earth and the Technodrome rising, but that's about all he does. The main plot of episode 25 in particular revolves around the turtles and their allies trying to destroy the Technodrome before it rises to prevent the Triceratons from destroying the entire Earth, which is incredibly frustrating because the Technodrome doesn't really pose a threat during the episode like it has in the past and is pretty quickly destroyed by the Triceratons. The potential of having a Krang and Triceraton invasion simultaneously could have been really interesting, but the execution was not compelling at all. I'm also generally not a fan of the writing in these episodes. When Leo is explaining the plan to stop the Technodrome from rising and Splinter asks what's going on, for some reason Leo doesn't explain it to him and instead says,
"You just have to trust me when I say the whole world is at stake. and only we can save it.
Additionally, there are multiple points in the episode where Mikey being clumsy gives away the turtles, which is incredibly frustrating considering how capable Mikey actually is and how they use the excuse of Mikey being the dumb one as a way to progress the plot. In general, everything goes wrong for the turtles in this episode and they fail left and right, which has the potential to be compelling, but here it's just kind of annoying, especially since they've defeated the Krang multiple times throughout the series, and yet they are very quickly overpowered. Part 2 has a 9.4 out of 10 and is generally more enjoyable than Part 1. I love seeing the heroes teaming up with the antagonists in an attempt to defeat the Triceratons, and that battle as well as the spaceship battle are really enjoyable to watch. I also love the way they flipped the psionic extractor on its head, with Mikey going on a crazy psychedelic trip instead of being tortured like intended. If only 2003 Donnie could say the same. My poor boy has gone through so much anguish. But overall, my main issue with the finale is the ending. I hate the Earth being sucked into a black hole and the world ending over a threat that was introduced 2 episodes ago. If this plot had been a ploy by the Krang, I might have enjoyed this bold choice to have them destroy the Earth a little bit more, but the fact that the Triceratons were introduced so last minute makes this finale so much less enjoyable. I also hate how everyone watched Splinter get killed right in front of them and watched the Earth and everyone they loved get sucked into this black hole, but as soon as they fly away on this spaceship to go on this adventure, Casey Jones shouts in excitement,
This is
my guy, you just watched the entire Earth get destroyed, including your family. What happened to you being concerned for your dad and sister like you were in the season 2 finale? 2012 Casey Jones, you are an exhausting character sometimes. When it comes to my distaste for the season 3 finale, there is of course that bias that I have against this space arc in general, and knowing how this plot unfolds in the next season being so poorly executed definitely taints the season 3 finale even more. But I still firmly believe that it is the weakest of the season finales and does not deserve to be labeled as a win whatsoever. I am kind of conflicted on whether I give it a sin or a pass because part 1 and the ending aren't good, but I did really enjoy most of part 2. That said, because of how poorly paced this finale and the introduction of the space arc are in the context of the series as a whole, I am going to be giving it a sin. The worst episode of TMNT 2012, according to IMDb, is season 3 episode 2, A Foot Too Big, from October 10th, 2014, with a 5.7 out of 10. Donatello helps save an injured Bigfoot from being hunted, who quickly falls uncomfortably in love with him and helps him realize his advances toward April have made her uncomfortable in the same way, but when the man who's been hunting Bigfoot realizes that she's a girl, the two of them fall in love and run off into the woods together. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Before I get into the April and Donnie stuff, I want to talk about Bigfoot specifically because that plot is something. Now, I get what they were trying to do with the parallels between Bigfoot and Donnie, but it's just so uncomfortable and weird. Like, obviously Donnie has had some problematic moments in the past, but none of his cringy moments are anywhere near as bad as Bigfoot's harassment. I think the extra layer of weird comes from the fact that they decided to have Bigfoot and the Finger get together at the end of the episode, because we know the Finger has been hunting Bigfoot for years, he's clearly an adult man, and presumably Bigfoot is an adult as well, which means Donnie is not only a victim of being made uncomfortable, he is a victim. And even then, Donnie's sort of painted in the wrong in this episode, like his treatment by Bigfoot is just karma. I don't know, I just really don't like how they handled Donnie's lesson in this episode. Which of course brings me to Donnie and April's relationship. The parallels between Donnie and Bigfoot here are clearly intended to teach Donnie a lesson, and if we set aside the fact that he is being sexually harassed by Bigfoot, crazy sentence by the way, if we set that issue aside, the entire point of this episode being an opportunity for Donnie to learn to respect April's boundaries and apologize to her is completely disregarded by the fact that she kisses him at the end. What are we doing? I think they wanted to continue that will they won't they plot, but if they were going to have an entire episode dedicated to addressing Donnie's behavior, why on earth would they throw away that moment of reflection like that? Even if they still wanted to keep that relationship open-ended, just have April use her damn words! Hey Donnie, I really appreciate the apology. I think I've just been uncomfortable because I'm not really sure of my feelings and I just want some space to figure it out for myself. How hard is that? I think it's especially frustrating for me because I am in that minority of people that does still ship April and Donnie because I think their relationship had a lot of potential, but I would have much rather seen this ship permanently die at the end of this episode than whatever the fuck they actually did. A Foot Too Big really could have done something productive with addressing addressing Donnie's feelings for April, but the execution was so extremely abysmal that it is undeniably a sin for TMNT 2012 and probably the worst episode in the series. The best episode of 2012's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, according to IMDb, is the season 4 finale, Requiem and Owari, from February 2017, with a 9.4 and 9.5 out of 10 respectively. Although these episodes technically aren't a two-parter like the other season finales, they very much read as such and are grouped together in that way, which is why I ultimately decided to combine them. They are the two highest rated episodes anyway, so the rest of the list is completely unaffected by grouping them together. Requiem has a 9.4 out of 10, and with the Super Shredder's mutation now stabilized, he attacks Karai and uses his henchmen to split the heroes up, with Raph, April, Casey, Splinter, and some of the mutanimals finding the Shredder, while the other three turtles plus Leatherhead take on Bebop, Rocksteady, and Fishface. With most of the turtles distracted in another fight, the Shredder seizes this opportunity to finally put an end to his enemy, Hamato Yoshi. Requiem ends with Splinter being killed, and I'm glad they made it so clear that this was a permanent death. With the handful of fake-out deaths, they were pretty quickly disproven as not necessarily being final, but they did a good job of clearly establishing here that this was Splinter's final death. And it is absolutely heartbreaking. I will say, I do wish they knew how to animate tears, because everyone is sniffling and crying and wiping their eyes, but there is not a tear in sight, and it really breaks the immersion. I do love the callback to the 1990 film with Shredder falling in the garbage truck and Casey activating it. Oops. The way 2012 Casey does it here is so much more menacing and angry, and I think it fits the difference in tone between the two iterations of the scene very effectively. Owari is the highest rated episode of the series with a 9.5 out of 10, and follows the Turtles, Casey, and April gearing up to confront the Shredder and finish him off once and for all. Although there is a 5th season of the series, Requiem and Owari are effectively the series finale and a great conclusion to the central conflict between Shredder and Splinter. As is always the case in these big plot episodes, the fighting is so fun to watch. The Turtles needing to fight their way up Shredder's lair past his main henchmen was a fairly compelling watch, and I'm really glad they made the choice to have April and Casey knocked off the building for the final fight with the Shredder, so it was just the Turtles facing him. I am a little bummed by the fact that it was ultimately just Leo that killed the Shredder as opposed to it being a team effort. Leo has obviously been written as the sort of main character in the eyes of Splinter. He's clearly the favorite and is expected to take Splinter's place in the wake of his death, so his killing off the Shredder really solidifies that role. Honestly, one of my main issues with this series as a whole is the way that Leo is always in the spotlight when it comes to the main plot points, and the other turtles are very rarely involved to the same degree. It takes away from them being a team a lot of the time, which I don't like seeing. On the topic of Leo in this episode, he has a couple of lines in the fight against Tiger Claw that are so... What are we saying, bro?
You dirty cat! You just used your 9th life, pussycat!
Outside of those gripes, this is a fantastic series finale, and though it isn't my favorite of the season finales, it is a very effective conclusion to the main story of the series and earns its label as a win for TMNT 2012. That does it for this episode of Sins and Wins. Let me know if you agree or disagree with these being the best and worst episodes of the series, and if there are any you were surprised didn't make the cut. I'm still not sure what series I'm going to be covering in the next Sins and Wins, but I will be putting up a poll eventually, so make sure to subscribe so you can see that poll and vote in it when it comes out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you did. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.